forward in this presentation, you'll see 195. And you're saying, I thought it was 197. Well, it was, but I took $4 million of that was simply replacing the roof at the Freeman. It was not a new facility of any kind, whereas the rest of the 197 was new facilities that would provide new activation for the grounds. I felt like that roof was more akin to the Frost Bank Center CapEx needs and moved it up to that bucket for consideration purposes. So that brought 197 down to 193. But then Derek told me he had slightly missed the number on the new bridges and canopies. He had it at 5, it needed to be 7, so we added 2, 195. That's the kind of work we've continued to do. So where are we now? After legal review by our lawyers, we believe the revised county obligation for 10 years for the Frost Bank Center is now closer to $44.8 million, as opposed to the 147 you saw. That assumes that the spurs are in that building till the end of 2030. If it's longer, that number will go down even more. New capacity estimates. We've continued to refine those estimates. In particular, we've had sail and cab. When we initially came out, we were assuming, like the spurs, they would want their money as soon as possible. Well, their phasing means that they don't need the bulk of their money until 2028 and then 2029. That extra 5 years or 4 or 5, that extra time allows growth in the existing venue tax to build more capacity. So that brings the new capacity from 448 to 503. And what I just laid out verbally is listed below. Finally, the last thing we will have done is tab the $48 million in available venue fund cash, and we're going to use that to partially offset the amount sail and cab need beginning in 2028. In other words, we'll cash fund the first $48 million of draws they need. So the result of all this is we have a capacity of 503. The Frost Bank Center needs are now estimated at 44.8. Sail and cab, when I use the 48 million in existing cash, their needed draw against that capacity drops to 147. That leaves 311 million available for a new Spurs arena. So our funding proposal is structured in a very careful, I think, way, and this has been communicated to the Spurs and they understand. The county proposes to use venue tax funding subject to voter approval to fund 25% of the cost of a new Spurs arena with a maximum not to exceed amount of 311. And I give a couple of examples below. If the new arena comes in at $1 billion, they don't get 311, they get 250. If it comes in at $2 billion, they'd be able to draw the whole 311 down, but not a penny more, which would be only 15% of the cost. So you heard Mr. Holt today say what has been reported widely, that the team is willing to put up to $500 million in team funds toward a new arena. The city and the Spurs are continuing discussions to finalize what the city's funding contribution will be. To my knowledge, council has taken no formal action regarding that contribution. And finally, beginning today, you're being asked to deliberate on calling an election in November for a venue tax that proposes to increase the hotel occupancy tax from 1.75% to 2%, provide funds for the Frost Bank Center CapEx, as well as a new sail cab investments, and potentially county contribution for a new Spurs arena. The actual deadline to call such an election is August 18th.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Thank you, Judge. David, thank you for being pretty succinct there. Let me ask a couple questions, just to clarify, I think both for myself, but also for the public discourse. We had a lot of folks come earlier this morning or today and testify. A lot of mentions of Project Marvel. I just want to be clear, that is a city project. The county has no involvement in Project Marvel. I think they rolled that out as a bigger, ambitious plan. What we're talking about here is the county venue tax, a portion of that going potentially to just a new arena in downtown. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's, from the county's point of view, coincidental that the city has chosen to put this arena in some bigger concept that we had, as far as I know, no input into. Yeah. And I've learned more from reading about Project Marvel in the paper than I have directly from the city.
Yeah.
We have no involvement in the bigger project.
And I just wanted to ask that clarifying question because I think the narrative seems to conflate that, and I don't know the details of that project either, and our focus has been on the new arena, but more importantly, and I want to acknowledge Judge Sakai's leadership, the initial priority has been taking care of county-owned assets, which is the East Side Frost Bank Center, the Freeman, the rodeo grounds. That has always been priority number one for us as it relates to potential use of the venue tax. Is that your understanding as well?
That's correct. It was basically structured as priority one, take care of your two, the Freeman and the Frost Bank. Okay. Priority two, enable sale and cab to activate the Freeman grounds, and whatever's left over you might consider contributing to a new arena.
So in that vein, should the court move forward today or by August 18th, the Bexar County public would be voting on authorizing two separate propositions. A Prop A, and I'm going to paraphrase, a Prop A would be for the increase, the 1.75 to 2% for use of the funds that up to I think it was 195 you said, for the East Side grounds.
As well as Frost Bank maintenance.
Frost Bank. Prop B would be for the 25% up to 311 for the new arena.
That's
right.
Correct.
And so voters would have the choice of voting on both of those, one of them, and that's how it would be presented essentially, though, to the voting public.
That's
Is that correct? Okay. So let me ask, I guess, a little bit about that, because I think we've all come to a place here where, early on it seemed a little bit counterintuitive for the county to put dollars into an arena that would essentially compete with our county-owned asset. I think part of where, at least I can't speak for the court, but where I've come is that the Spurs are an important part of our community. And I've never heard from them or either explicitly or hinted that their desire was to leave San Antonio. I think that their priority's always been to stay, but to be part of the rebirth of a downtown corridor that needs to be kind of in the middle of the renaissance of downtown. But I also think we ought to deal in reality, and that is that sports are competitive, and there are probably other communities out there that would be salivating to have our Spurs go to their communities. But again, that's not been part of the calculation. That's just something I'm saying is in the back of my mind. And so, I think it's important to underscore that. I think the other thing to kind of highlight is, and you've mentioned it a few times in your presentation, and that's the term subject to voter approval. We are essentially moving forward, if we do today, to put this on the ballot, but it by no means obligate any dollars today. It essentially is going to be up to the voters, and That gives me confidence in the sense that that's as much as you can get a democratic process, and if folks believe that this is a good project. Obviously, there's other moving parts. The city and the Spurs are still talking, but this would be our contribution to making sure that the Spurs are here, hopefully for the next 50 years. I know they just celebrated their 50th anniversary. And the way I look at this is, of course, growing up a Spurs fan, but taking that away as a policymaker is an economic development deal, much like if HEB came to us or Frost Bank or USAA and said, hey, we want to grow and we want to continue to grow with San Antonio. We believe it's a good partnership, and we've seen that for 25 years that the Spurs have been good partners. I think that we would look at ways, whether it was through tax incentives or some other way, to make sure those companies grow here and flourished here. And so that's the way I see this. In this case, we are utilizing potentially a source of revenue that was dedicated specifically for a venue type project, and it's paid for by folks who visit our community. It's not paid by general revenue funds or the property tax owners. So that gives me a lot of confidence that we, I think, are making a good investment. And again, ultimately, it's up to the voters to decide. So I know we've got plenty of other questions and comments, but I do want to put a motion on the floor today, Judge, and let me read it so it's compliant. The motion would be to approve an order by the Commissioners Court of Bexar County, Texas, ordering an election to be held in Bexar County, Texas on November 4th, 2025, on the question of approving and implementing a resolution designating the development of improvements to Freeman Coliseum, Frost Bank Center, and San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo facilities, and a new multi-purpose arena for the San Antonio Spurs as venue projects, and designating the method of financing of such venue projects pursuant to Chapter 334 of the Texas Local Government Code, making provisions for the conduct of the election and for the conduct of a joint election with various political subdivisions, providing for other matters related to such election, and providing an effective date. That's fine.
And I have a question.
Motion by Commissioner Rodriguez, second by Commissioner Clay Flores. Commissioner Clay Flores, you have the floor.
So it's unfortunate that just this whole day and this whole process has taken so long, because there were so many citizens to be heard earlier, and it looks like most of them are not here. So I wish I could respond to some things. Commissioner Rodriguez touched on some of it, so I'm going to reiterate some stuff, because no matter how many times we say this, the misinformation is out there that we are using taxpayer dollars on things where we have more important needs. I agree, if we can decide where to use venue or hot tax, personally, I put it all in mental health, keeping people from rotting in jail, preventive health, colon cancer awareness stuff. There's so many things that I fight for that I would rather have money put for. But legally, we are the county, we are an agent of the state, and legally by state law, venue hot tax has to be voted on by voters. So I'm supporting this because my constituents get to go vote and decide. And when they vote on this, it can only be used for certain venues, period. We can't use it on housing. We can't use it on mental health as much as I would like. So I just hope that as we talk about this as a community and the media, that we can put better information out there. This was not started by us, but we are here to make this decision. So the way that I explain this to my constituents is it's like the county's the landlord and we have three tenants: the Freeman, the Rodeo, and the Spurs. So we need to be good landlords and first take care of our assets, which are the Freeman Coliseum and the Frost Bank Center. Also, being a proud San Antonio girl and growing up as a Spurs fan, like Commissioner Rodriguez, I want to make sure that our Spurs stay here. And this is part of the competitive world of sports and new arenas and technology and the American economy. Ideally, I would love for us to just remodel, like a good landlord, remodel an old building. But apparently that's not good enough. So that's why I'm happy to support this so that we can take it to our voters and let our voters decide if we're gonna give the Spurs a new arena so that they can keep up with the NBA world of new arenas and technology. Also part of the miscommunication is this is not Project Marvel. We as the county have nothing to do with that. Nada que ver. So please stop talking about, when y'all talk to us, quit talking to us about Marvel and City. We are the county. Thank you.
Commissioner Moody.
Well, thank you, Judge. Appreciate everyone's participation today and appreciate so many friends coming out from the rodeo and the Spurs. R.C. Buford, got Bobby and Walter, got Cody from the rodeo here. Audrey's somewhere back there as well. Phil, see you hiding out in the back. So many friends of our community. But this is a difficult item. I want to say, you know, and I've said this before, I support the rodeo 100%. And I support our Spurs 100%. I have been working with our Spurs organization on North Park, which is going to be a new county park in the vicinity of the Rock. It's a great partnership. Look forward to continuing it as we go forward. But this deal, as written, contains a poison pill that I just can't swallow. And that's the tax increase of $50 million that's included in it. I hope that everyone knows that I've negotiated in good faith on this item. I've tried to make it better along the way and advocated for my constituents and for taxpayers. This item, though, as written, again, was not my choice. And I really wanted to get to yes. I wanted to get to a place where I could support it. And I made these good faith efforts towards that end. I am glad to see the 25% cap that's included, which I offered up, and I'm glad to see that. I think it keeps balance in the deal and it protects Bexar County taxpayers. And there are real economic benefits to both these projects. Obviously, the expansion of the rodeo grounds and ensuring that our Spurs stay in San Antonio for the next 50 years, as my colleagues highlighted. We shouldn't look past that, right? I will say, for the record, I think some of the projections that have recently been reported in the media are extremely rosy, but there are real economic development impacts and value in both these projects. But again, this ballot proposition incorporates this tax hike, and it's just a bridge too far. So, last 2 points I'll make here. The timing of this is also problematic. We have previously discussed in this court that we would want to see a commitment, not only from the Spurs, but from the city of San Antonio, before making a decision to put anything on the ballot. Obviously, we sit here today and we do not have a commitment from the city of San Antonio on their contribution to the Spurs Arena. I find that problematic, making a commitment to put something on the ballot without an entire or complete structure in place. But I do support the opportunity for voters to weigh in on this item. And you know, ultimately they will make their decision in November, but I just can't endorse the $50 million tax increase in this ballot proposition. Thank you.
Commissioner Calvert.
Thank you, Judge, and I want to thank everyone who came to speak today, and just know from my vantage point, I hear everybody. I've heard you all. We have begun an initial meeting, a community benefits agreement meeting with the rodeo, with the Coliseum Advisory Board. The Spurs were not present at that time, but I anticipate that they will be in future conversations. I think all of the parties understand the importance of having those conversations for electoral success. I have concerns about the wisdom of choosing an off-year November election on the cusp of a recession, and I have made those clear to the chair of the Coliseum Advisory Board and this court, but this is the path free will has chosen. And I will take the policy suggestions and those who made them to the discussions of community benefit that will be the focus of this vote for every voter. As someone who has always believed people will make the best choices for themselves eventually, and I say eventually because people do not always make the right choice initially, but over time and the course of understanding, they do make the right choices. Here we are, onward to an election. Thank you, Judge.
All right. Any further conversation or communication with the court?
Yes,
Commissioner Clay Flores, I'll yield back to you.
I just have to reiterate, I didn't say this when I said it earlier. This is not a tax increase. That's part of the misinformation in the community. This is for people who come to town and stay in a hotel and rent a car. So I don't know about y'all, but I don't rent cars here and I don't stay in hotels. So this is a tax on tourists, on visitors who come. This is not a tax increase. Thank you.
Hey, any further comments? I'll close with my comments. Let me go on record and be crystal clear as the county judge of this wonderful county. You heard me early this morning with Bishop Pfeiffer and Rabbi Nathan to ask that they would include Bexar County in the prayers so that we can come together as a community. I hope after today that although we had a robust discussion, that no matter what decision is made today, that we will come back as a community, although we may not always agree. And we may have very serious disagreement what action is being taken today. But let me say this. Let me give a little history for the record, for the public, for the media. Since we first learned of the conversations between the city and the Spurs about a possible move downtown in 2023, this is my first year as county judge. Had no idea that I would, in my first term, have this issue on the table. But that's what I signed up and running for county judge. This court and county staff have worked diligently, and I want to applaud David Smith and his staff. And in the limited time frame to steer this period of tremendous growth toward an outcome that best serves our community. We said no deal without a plan for the County Coliseum Complex, the Frost Bank Center, and the Freeman. We said no homeowner property taxes for the county's contribution, substantial private equity by the Spurs, and a joint public-private partnership of a new proposed arena. And we said clearly, and I articulated, we are prioritizing the East Side redevelopment with our investments. In planning with our partners at the Coliseum Advisory Board led, and I want to thank Derek Howard and his board for their leadership, the rodeo, Cody Davenport, his board, and his tremendous cadre of volunteers that put on one of the most successful rodeos in this country. The city of San Antonio and the Spurs have made great strides since 2023. Yet, in January of this year, despite tremendous pressures, I made it clear there was not enough information to move forward with the May election, the city elections. Since then, we have committed, and I want to remind both the county, the city, and the Spurs that we agreed to work in good faith with a memorandum of understanding. And we worked with the Coliseum Advisory Board, and we worked with the leadership of San Antonio's because they are valuable partners and stakeholders in this discussion. Today, now, we have a plan to redevelop the Coliseum complex and maintain Frost Bank Center and the Freeman. The Coliseum and rodeo teams have top-notch leaders. They engaged in world-class venue and events, consultants to inform a plan to redevelop and activate the county fairgrounds year-round, a sustainable business plan for our county facilities, drawing community, commerce, and activity to the east side. And you heard that today with some of the support because of what the rodeo has done for our community, and establishing accessible community amenities. This meets our fiduciary duty to protect these county facilities and taxpayer investments over the long term. So, we are now in a position to set a foundational piece for the east side with the renovated Coliseum grounds and facilities. So let me say that again, a foundational piece. This is just the start of what we can do, and sky's the limit for the east side that should have been delivered many years ago, but yet has yet to be done. And so I understand everybody wants all these particular projects. Let me remind everybody that that is my promise and commitment that we're continuing to commit to the redevelopment of the east side. This is just the start. This is the foundational piece that needs to be done in order to think big for the east side and that area around the Frost, Freeman, and Coliseum grounds. This also meets our commitments. No homeowner property taxes. We're looking exclusively through the venue tax, a tourist tax from hotel rooms and vehicle rentals. I agree to disagree with Commissioner Moody. The proposed hot tax from 1.75% to 2% is crucial to keep Bexar County competitive in the long haul. We will have future venue projects, and that is a discussion that this court will continue to have. What else can we do with the statutory requirements that Commissioner Clay Flores put out? We can continue to do more for this community with this particular venue tax, and why can't we and why shouldn't we take advantage of a 0.25% on the tourist to make these projects happen throughout the county, to hopefully address what the community has asked us to do. Judge, you got a lot of things we want. Well, nothing comes free, guys. We need to continue to grow. If that, and I'll make it very clear, if we don't grow, then status quo is not acceptable for a growing community such as Bexar County. In January, we made it clear there was not enough information to move forward with the May election. And there was not enough coordination and collaboration with partners. Quite frankly, the Spurs, they're here in the room, they pushed me hard. They wanted a May election. I said, no way, sorry. But the court backed me up at that time. Since then, we set out an MOU with the city and the Spurs to establish a mutual exploration and pursuant to our Coliseum redevelopment and new downtown arena. We now have laid out our contributions, as have the Spurs. We heard from Peter John Holt this morning. $500 million in direct arena cost. Another $500 million in private development that will help support the city's contribution through the TERS, the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, which is the same mechanism that we used to support and now are set out for a new baseball stadium downtown, and a proposed community benefits agreement upwards of $30 million, which is an agreement between the Spurs and the city. And I've told the Spurs, we still need to fulfill a community engagement plan. So I'll be back to you, Spurs. The city has laid out a solid funding framework and funding mechanisms. City Manager Eric Walsh says they're in the range of 450 to 500 million. While they have yet to take formal action, I believe, according to the negotiations and the conversations, that they are edging toward an agreement with the Spurs. And I will take the good faith of the Spurs in the city of San Antonio that they will have a deal. And through town halls, and I want to applaud Commissioner Calvert and his town hall meetings. Again, you heard, the community does not understand the deal, so to speak. They have needs, and they made it very clear that they feel that the promises to the east side have not been met. And that's the reason why I believe today is the first step towards making that commitment. I want to applaud my co-chair with the East Side Advisory Council, Representative Barbara Hawkins, who I think is tied up, maybe out of state at this time, and the many direct stakeholders, meetings. We've received substantial public input, and I've made it clear to the East Side Council that we're in it for the long haul. We're going to have to continue to meet so that we fulfill the promises that were made to the East Side. I believe there's a compelling case that establishing a new downtown arena will expand our economic development and commercial activity in a way that will benefit the entire community. Again, I give respect to those that disagree, but can we agree to disagree and hopefully make a decision in the best interest of this community? I believe that redeveloping the East Side facilities and improving the ability of the rodeo and the Coliseum Advisory Board to program year-round will set a foundational piece for the redevelopment of the East Side. As we prepare to take this momentous step with the vote we're about to take, it is the expectation of this Commissioners Court that the City of San Antonio will act decisively in resolving the negotiations and moving for a final deal so that the public can understand. But you also have heard the comments. The county is not connected with Project Marvel. This referendum is very specific. It is being done in order to get approval from the Attorney General, and it is two steps. Can we commit the county venue tax to the county facilities, Frost Bank Center, Freeman Coliseum, the Coliseum grounds, and whatever is left over with the cap? Can we help the San Antonio Spurs? I am committed to keep the San Antonio Spurs in the city of San Antonio, Bexar County. May I also suggest that although the word Project Marvel, and I believe Commissioner Clay Flores has made it very clear, that this transaction, this vote today is not in any way whether we approve or disapprove Project Marvel. What I am submitting to you, the public, to the voters, and to my colleagues on the court is to support, quote, an economic revitalization of the downtown and east side with a joint city-county project. And can we join with the San Antonio Spurs, a great corporate citizen organization that gives back much to this community? And I give them value and credit for what they do as a team, what they do individually through their players, through Coach Pop, through Peter John Holt, and the administration, R.C. Buford, Bobby Pettis. I thank the San Antonio Spurs for the contributions you've made year in and year out. But I'll also tell the San Antonio Spurs, we still got a lot of work to do, and we still have much more to do. And I expect y'all to keep up that philanthropic contribution. So today, Commissioner Rodriguez, you have moved. Commissioner Clay Flores, you have second. I intend to to support this motion? If there's no further discussion, I will call for a vote. I will call for a roll call vote. Commissioner Clay Flores.
Yes.
Commissioner Justin Rodriguez.
Aye.
Commissioner Graham Moody.
No.
Commissioner Tommy Calvert. County Judge votes aye. Motion is approved. This concludes this action item. We will now go on to, refresh my memory there, we're going.
1:30.
Okay, we have a time certain, so let me tee up time certain, 1:30.
Next gen.
Which is the presentation, discussion, appropriate action regarding the proposed improvements and expansion of San Antonio River Authority's next generation flood warning system. Mr. David Smith, I think San Antonio River Authority. Welcome to the Commissioners Court. We're running a little late here, so David Smith started off.
So you guys just took an important action, but in my humble opinion, the vote you're going to be asked to take on this is even more important. So
Concur.
after the Beitel Creek events recently, the county judge's office asked the River Authority to prepare a post-event report on what they believe happened. When I read the report, I was struck by the level of modeling they were capable of doing on that creekway. So I asked Derek for a meeting and said, Derek, can we do it this same level of modeling on all our creekways? And he said, not only can we, but we're in the process of doing it. And in fact, I think he's more than half the way there. So then I asked the next question, which was, if we have predictive models in place, why can't we put in a set of predictions that says, I'll use your Commissioner Moody, your precinct. You put an inch of rain per hour for 3 hours over Helotes Creek, what's going to happen? 2 inches per hour for 3 hours, 3 inches, 4 inches. Have that sitting on a shelf countywide, or better yet, plugged into some automated system. Derek already has meteorologists on standby for these events. So if you could put that modeling in place with the appropriate technology, near real-time rain gauge sensors, feeding that data into a model that already exists, why couldn't we proactively instruct people to shut down the low water crossings before the flooding ever happens? And he said, yes, we can do it. And a week later, I was talking about money with him. So I want to thank Derek and his team for responding so quickly. He's calling it the next generation flood warning system. What I think it does is has the potential to be a game changer locally and to turn first responders into pre-sponders. With that, I'll turn it over to Derek.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, Judge. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Derek Bays, General Manager and CEO of the San Antonio River Authority, and I'm also the Chairman of Region 12, the Regional Flood Planning Group that was stood up by the state in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Steve Metzler is with me. He is our Director of Water Resources and one of our technical experts. I'd also like to recognize our Chairman, Mr. Jim Campbell of the San Antonio River Authority Board. Should I use this for the clicker? Okay. So just a brief summary to talk about, the circumstances that lead San Antonio to have the flooding challenges that it does. We sit at the base of the Balcones Escarpment. You have a unique intersection of western and coastal plains. You have a lot of unpredictable weather. You have a rapid elevation change. A lot of people don't realize, but it's actually over 800 feet in elevation change in a very short period of time. And then the ground underneath, impervious limestone, a lot of erosive soils, and very steep slopes in places, all of which leads to a combination that makes us, in prime location in Flash Flood Alley, and has led to a number of, unfortunate and tragic events over the years. But why we're here today, as David described, and I appreciate his comments about my team, we have a lot of really smart people, far smarter than I am, I will say. The meteorologist he referred to is not only a meteorologist, but also a professional licensed engineer. which is one of the more unique combinations I've come across in my career. But it's folks like that that really give us a chance to get ahead of these sort of things, and that's why I'm here today to talk about what we hope will be county investment, because things change. Development changes, population, the growth that the region has seen in the last number of years certainly adds to the challenges that we face. Technology changes. Just the event of AI itself has led to a number of developments, and we think it's time to reevaluate how our models and our predictive flood models work. And also weather changes. We see more unpredictable events. We see more severe events that are oftentimes very localized, like we saw with the unfortunate incident on Beitel Creek in June, where 13 people lost their lives. So this just highlights the unique challenges that we face in our region. I will say too, there are not only the San Antonio River runs through Bexar County, but you have 5 major creeks, and you have countless number of smaller creeks and waterways that, as the water flows, contributes to the risk to both people's lives and people's property. Brief history. So the Bexar Regional Watershed Management Partnership, or the BRWM, was formed back in 2002. Started with a response to the floods of 1998, and then brought together again by flooding in the early 2000s. What it is now is a virtual flood district, which has 22 public entities within Bexar County, the leaders of which are Bexar County, the San Antonio River Authority, and the City of San Antonio. Since 2002, we collectively have invested over $2 billion in flood mitigation projects. That is the county bond programs, that is city bond, that is river authority technology and development, and that also includes operations and maintenance, annual smaller projects that don't meet the bond, but $2 billion. But what I'm here to say is, as I said, times change, and we believe it is also time to continue that investment and use all these reasons to take us to the next level. This is just a quick snapshot, but this Bexar Regional Watershed Management, we run a website called bearflood.org. It currently pulls in gauge data from the county gauge network, the city gauge network, River Authority gauge network, and others. There's a floodplain viewer, there's a watershed master plan viewer. But this data is also used currently to help populate things like Waze and Google Maps. And we're in discussions with Apple right now. So what we're talking about today is, what does that roadmap to the future look like? When David and I met 2 weeks ago, man, it feels, doesn't seem like 2 weeks ago. But I think we challenged each other to really say, what does the best-in-class system look like? How do we progress the safety and the security of our community? I will highlight, you can never eliminate risk. Anybody who works in the flood world will tell you that, but there are things we can do to help reduce and mitigate it. And that's what I want to talk to the court about today. It's going to take multiple things. Some of those we believe we can start immediately or in the very near term, next couple of months. Some will take probably a year. Others will take longer than that when you get into major infrastructure projects, but you have to start somewhere. And so the goals of this multi-pronged approach, reduce or eliminate the water rescues at low water crossings, improve our technology. Again, things change so rapidly in the technological world. We think we can do a lot more. We updated our predictive flood model, what we call Predictive Flood 2.0, roughly 4 years ago was when we rolled that out, but a lot has changed since then. Get more structures out of the floodplain and the floodway, and above all, make everything more resilient to be able to respond to events as future weather conditions change. So this multi-pronged approach, the flood warning system is the primary reason that I'm here today speaking to the court, but it also means flood infrastructure. Those are those big projects that people often associate with bond programs. Those are part of this. Communications and advocacy. I think it's oftentimes easy to forget about that, but making sure the public knows and is constantly reminded. What we often see following a major disaster, whether that's here, New Orleans, where I came from previously, or anywhere across the country, that memories fade and complacency starts to set in. And so we believe it's incumbent upon any sort of program to make sure that the risks and the dangers that remain stay in the forefront of people's minds. And then finally, with whatever system that we build, the county builds, anyone who's in this takes on, you have to maintain it and you got to keep it up and running. So since David, and I had that discussion a couple of weeks ago, working with Art and the county's public works team, input from the city of San Antonio, we came up with cost estimates for what we think we need for the region to get a much more improved flood warning system. And what you see there is the top two lines are roughly $22 million. That's the Bexar County system, the city of San Antonio system. There's another, we estimate, almost $33 million worth of needs. I want to highlight, those are not in Bexar County. Those would be in our jurisdiction, which goes downstream to Wilson, Carnes, and Goliad. But also, we would look to expand the network and the flood warning system in the 4 counties that are adjacent, generally on the northern side of Bexar County, because as you can see going back, the watershed on the right is far bigger than my jurisdiction. It's far bigger than Bexar County, and there's a lot of creeks and rivers that flow into our jurisdiction. This is a cliche, but I think it's often important to repeat, is that water does not care about political boundaries. So a total right now is our estimate of roughly $55 million. We've sent that forward to the legislature, but there's a lot of uncertainty in what they will focus on. But I think we can take action working with our partners at the county today to, regardless of what happens, to be, stand on our own and move this system forward. I won't go into all the details. If there are any specific questions as I go along or at the end, Steve Metzler here can help answer some of the more technical questions, but a little over $10 million currently estimated. What you see is low water, essentially an improvement in gauges, in the type of gauges, the quantity of gauges, the SCADA system or the automated system that takes in all of this data and helps process it and send it to the appropriate place, whether it's our predictive flood system or the Emergency Operations Center. A big chunk of this is low water crossing gates, roughly almost just under $5 million of that, which are also an important part. There is no silver bullet to mitigating flood problems. There are gauges and there are warnings, there are gates, there's better software, there's communication. None of it can do it by itself. It takes a combination of these types of efforts. And then also upgrading our software, which we believe will help get the system, take that gauge network, run it faster, run it better, and look for that more detailed analysis that David referred to. Very similar, these are the needs within the city of San Antonio. Also, same thing, gauges, improving the programming, more gauges, and then a lot of low water crossing gates and warning systems. Almost 2/3 roughly of their needs sit with the low water crossing gates. And just quick example. So this roadmap, this flood warning system, right now, both in the gauge network and our own computer software network, we have proprietary technology. That's what was available at the time. We want to get away from that. We believe that it will be faster and more efficient, and in the long run, actually probably cheaper to get away from proprietary and be able to use things that are more readily available. Expand and improve on that system of sensors and proactive alerts. It boils down to time, because the faster that a gauge can read something and get it to our system, we can feed it to the EOC, we can feed it to our predictive flood, and that shortens the time for first responders to get out there and do what they need to, for public works to get out there and block roads if necessary, but time is very, very critical. And then update that predictive flood model, which is an ongoing process, but we think we can take it to the next level with the county's support. So immediate, make sure everything, all those gauges are working, and also do some reprogramming to get gauge alert thresholds that have additional warning levels. That will help feed more information. That's probably 3 to 6 months ballpark as we work through this. And I should emphasize, we are still working through costs. We think we can refine those as we go, and that will help drive a better timeline that we can come back to the court and discuss once we've got a better handle on it. But our current estimate is probably 3 to 6 months. Short term, standardize that programmable equipment, get manually low water crossing gates out. You know, if the ideal, the end state when it comes to a low water crossing gate is that it's automated, that there's a trigger from like a rain gauge or a stream gauge it'll automatically close. But in the interim, work towards getting gates in the appropriate places that a crew can go out and close by hand. Single command center, single node, so it can be easily shared with all partners, the city, the county, the suburban cities that we work with, neighboring counties, up to the state, wherever it needs to go, that's the end state. And then get our new software, our new predictive flood model, what we're calling 3.0, and take that to the next level. That is probably a 12-month process at our current estimate. And then long-term, leverage that predictive flood model to help get better in future infrastructure needs and get those low water crossing barricade gates automated. This looks a little busy, but I think what you see on the left as I'm looking at the screen, it's that network of stream and rain gauges, and I think that's important. It's not just a rain gauge, you need the stream gauges too. Those all will feed into, currently feed into the city and the county sensors, some of our own. They all come together at the River Authority, and then they get pushed out through bearflood.org or through Waze or Google Maps or to the appropriate EOCs as necessary. But we think there is a better way as we progress. And I'll talk about that in a second. I talked briefly about communications and advocacy. We can't forget about this, but the public service campaigns, regularly reminding people about the risk they take about flooding and what it can do and what is important to remember. We even had discussions internally. Some of my staff have kids that have just gone through driver's ed, and their relay was that there's not one single mention of what to do when you're dealing with driving on a flooded road, a heavily flooded road. They talk about rain when it's wet, but there's a big difference when you're driving. Public awareness for when we get that new software and hardware out there, and then just continued additional outreach. And O&M, this is always the tricky part because, again, memories fade. And it's not a new piece of software, it's not a new dam, it's not one of those things, but it takes maintenance to keep them up and to have them do their job and perform when the time comes. So we want to make sure that O&M stays to the forefront of all of our minds. But I also want to say, right now we have the city's network, the county's network, some river authority. We believe it's best that there's one entity that runs that flood warning system. We need to work out details with David and his team and propose them back, but we think the River Authority is in an excellent position to take on that responsibility. We welcome that challenge. And then the county continues its operations and maintenance for those structural and non-structural mitigation assets. So with that, Judge, Commissioners, that concludes my presentation. My team and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Commissioner Calvert?
Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much, Derek, for the great presentation. Let me just ask you a little bit about the gates. When we look at the infrastructure around the Beitel area, we saw metal barricades completely ripped, bent like pieces of paper, concrete destroyed. Are these simply, I saw that photo pretty fast, are these like high alert arms, or are these a more substantial structure?
These arms would be located out of the floodway instead of...
They're arms, so.
They're arms, yeah, and they are subject to being damaged and being hit by debris, but they'll be located outside the floodway so that it minimizes the opportunity for being damaged.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make, I'm glad you're thinking about that. We also had an issue of vandalism out in our East Central area where as soon as we put it down, I can't believe somebody stole it, but they did.
Right.
and you've got security cameras, you've got all that infrastructure there, as well as the lighting, and the solar lighting is a great thing that can really help, because in a lot of these places, especially in the unincorporated county, you don't have the ability to see because there's no lights out there. So I appreciate that as part of this overall package. Let me ask you if what I've learned jives with what you all have seen. When you talk about the larger infrastructure projects, I think I have to make it clear that in my conversations, or at least in hearing the Kirk County conversation and the San Antonio Bexar County conversation, the real solution is not high alert arms and these systems, it's better flood control projects. These are larger infrastructure projects, a combination of things, but you can be stuck in, a high water situation in a very fast way if you don't have larger retention and detention. And in the case of the Beitel corridor, it's my understanding that there was 6 and 6.2 inches of rain that fed the two basins, the watershed, within a 5 square mile radius within that time period, that caused the water to be the way it was. But the impervious cover, the fact that you had all this concrete across the Beitel corridor, is what drove that speed of the water as it came, down into the catchment basin of Beitel Creek. And that what is needed then is additional retention, detention, natural vegetative areas like what the county did on Fredericksburg Road at the old Spanish Trail. Soccer fields really is what they are now, that would slow that water out to go into the ground and be retained or detained. Does that jive with what you're seeing, let's say, for the Beitel Creek area?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Steve can also jump in. But yeah, I think, gray infrastructure, if you will, the big things that you just mentioned, Commissioner, detention, retention basins, that type of thing, have to be any part of a plan, a comprehensive plan based on the area that we live and serve in. You also mentioned the more natural and nature-based solutions. Those are important as well. In fact, the county had done a project on Beitel Creek a number of years ago that is a more vegetated area, and you do not see the same damage that we saw in the concrete-lined areas. So I think it's a matter of knowing, what the appropriate tool is to deal with that particular problem at any given time. It's a combination, but it all has to be part of that big discussion.
Yeah.
You stole some of my thunder, but yeah, absolutely. The transitioning to detention and retention is a big part of it, but that is only a solution. It's bringing back the natural stream bank is what we've done, especially on that Beitel Creek, where we've added a wide spot in the stream. So just upstream of Vicar Road, it's very channelized and narrow, and I think you identified the speed of the water going through there. But just downstream of Vicar Road on Beitel Creek, same stream, same flows, but it got very wide and flat in that area, and that allowed the stream to slow down, and those destructive speeds just were eliminated. So it really wasn't even in detention, it was just how the stream was shaped, and that's what we focus on at the River Authority.
So I grew up in the area. I used to ride my bike all along the area. Actually, those ditches were not built when I was a kid. They were actually built afterwards. One of the things that we saw, if you go behind the academy in that area around 410, there is a warehouse business that's been abandoned where they had a metal fence, and that metal fence was completely flat because the water took the metal bars and just made them flat. But the good part about it being abandoned is that could potentially be an area for acquisition for a retention, detention, sports park, kind of greenery area, because the drainage ditch is 15, I don't know, between 12 and 20 feet. And I just happened to go back into my old neighborhood up there in Beitel to see how the water, whether or not it went into the neighborhood, and it did. It was still sitting there some days later after the storm, and that has me concerned for the residents that I represent in the area, that even though there was this, what I would call, pretty big drainage channel, there is still, without additional flood mitigation around the catchment corridor, there is still high risk that there will be another incident that causes mass flooding in residents and other areas. So one of the questions I have, I think a lot of residents want to know, with respect to the cleanup, there's still a lot of rubble there. And when will, I mean, and how do you think that impacts our drainage that's existing today? And when will we get that so that the channel flows and isn't obstructed by that rubble? Any thoughts about that?
I will let Steve answer the technical portion of, what does that potentially do to the flow. I know that the city of San Antonio has requested $21 million in their legislative ask specifically for debris cleanup in regards to that Beitel Creek flood. It does not reach the FEMA threshold, which is $50 million plus worth of damage. So they're asking the special session for that to assist with that. I don't have a current timeline on their debris removal efforts. But I think you did bring up a good point, Commissioner. It's not just, infrastructure, but there are also other considerations. In that same general area, there was a buyout program previously where homeowners, were bought out of their property that were prone to repetitive flooding. And that probably saved, a number of properties and potentially lives during this most recent event. So I think there are a lot of tools. There are things like home elevation programs.
That's right.
There are things like, don't build in the floodway, but also, should we look at what does the 100-year look like? We've seen success in other areas where there's a buffer adjacent to waterways. Doesn't have to be super wide, but that can help absorb some of that overflow when a stream hits flood level or a river hits flood level. So again, I think there's a menu of tools that can be applied, but every circumstance and terrain and geography is a little bit different.
Yeah. As far as what kind of impacts the debris does in the channel, how it affects the water, absolutely causes floodwaters to rise. So
Floodwater to rise, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In the engineering terms, we'd call it a hydraulic loss, but
Right. Absolutely.
the effect is the water gets backed up in those regions. So, and it doesn't have to be construction debris or any of the debris from that was impacted, like you saw it landed on Vicar Drive. But anytime trash makes its way into
Right.
our streams and waterways, every little bit adds up. I mean, how many tons did we pull out last year? I mean,
Right.
there's tons of trash makes its way into a watershed. So it's not just unsightly, it makes a big impact on floodwaters.
Well, I do want to point out that, I've never seen Texas, the state of Texas, use the rainy day fund for one of our rainiest days, and I find it ironic.
A little bit.
And really an outrage that we've been through the ice storm, we've been through floods, and we never use our rainy day fund to help local communities. It would be nice, since the feds haven't kicked in on their threshold, that the state could help get this thing taken care of, because that's what it's there for. And I mean, it's literally the rainy day. With respect to the trash that's in our waterways, we as an office struggle all the time with calls where people have drainage ditches that are overflowing with veg. My neighborhood right now, I've been trying to get Union Pacific and the city of San Antonio to clean up, where the drainage has 8-foot grass. It's just terrible. Because we really worry about, on a street like mine where it's one way in, one way out, what will happen if we have another rain coming. It's not necessarily a pretty scene because we are next to a waterway, Salado Creek, one of your major focus areas here. But the question I have for you is with respect to the boons. We did the litter boon for the first time across several of our waterways. I've often thought about the trash buildup being ameliorated by litter booms. We've never had a real systemic implementation in this community, but I think some others have begun so. Can you give me your thoughts about, one, from your maintenance standpoint, I'm sure it's a lot easier than what we normally do in the cleanups, but as part of this whole flood mitigation, if we're talking about tons of trash in our waterways, how can litter booms, what would the impact be? Is this something that's ever been measured?
I'm not sure about the measurement. I know that the River Authority has experimented or pilot project with booms in a couple of different places. A lot of it depends on the design of the boom, the location of the boom, and then the type of water that hits it. Oftentimes you see with boom systems, as soon as you get a really heavy rain, it's the effect is mitigated because it just all washes over. The other challenge we have is thatch. All the cut grass from mowing that blows in, that is heavier, generally speaking, than any trash that might hit the boom. And so it is sinking it down, dragging it down, and clogging it up, and therefore it's not being effective for trash. It is something absolutely willing to look at as we explore this further. Again, it's a tool in the tool shed to help mitigate that. But yes, we pull tens of thousands of pounds from Mission Reach of trash every year. The city, I'm not even sure what they pull from behind Olmos Dam, which is a collection point for a lot of those areas north. And that's just in two sort of major areas. That doesn't count Westside Creeks, your neighborhood where you talked about. And so I think when you talk about trash, it is a multi-pronged approach there as well. There is an education aspect, which we have done. We have tried to do some of at the River Authority when people, don't throw stuff in the bed of your pickup and then drive down the road because it all blows out. Pick up your dog, pick up after your dog. But you just have to keep talking about it. But I think there's other things too. I mean, we've floated the idea to the city of, how often are they looking at, when do people put out their trash cans? Do they put them, there's a window, typically 24 hours before pickup, and they have to pick it up within 24 hours after pickup. Are they putting it out early? Are they leaving it out? Because oftentimes you see that those things tip over, dogs, whatever, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch more stuff in the street. So, and more constant pickup. Are there street sweeper cleaning opportunities in critical areas, which our water quality work has looked at, that make more of a difference than just doing things on a regular basis? You get more bang for your buck in some places than others. So booms are part of that. We could probably talk about trash, and if you talk to my field crews, that is their number one frustration, because when you're trying to get a plastic bag or a beer six-pack or whatever it is from a tree that's 12 feet up in the air, it is, and it's up and down the Mission Reach, it is pretty frustrating. So we would love, whether it's part of this discussion or related but separate discussion, to talk more about trash, because it is a problem and it is frustrating.
Well, we're just beginning what I think is a very healthy conversation for the community. I spoke about these issues because they're not often talked about in the press. We need to talk about these multitudes of ways that we combat our flooding in Flash Flood Alley. Let me just say on behalf of our constituents, thank you to the River Authority. Thank you, Derek. Thank you for what you do, and your team who work very hard to try to keep our waterways flowing right. So we'll continue to support you and do things to help that effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Moody.
Well, thank you, Judge, and thank you for being here and presenting, and David for bringing this item forward. Appreciate your comments, Commissioner Calvert. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think this is a real opportunity, a moment that we need to seize, both as a county, as a city, as a region, and I hope we do that. We had a conversation a week ago on this, and I've been giving it a lot of thought, but one of the things I mentioned was when we talk about flooding and disaster response and everything, what are our priorities? It can be property protection and flood mitigation, or it could be, maintaining access, roadways, think low water crossings, or it can be the protection of human life, right? I think that no one's going to argue with me that our number one priority should be the protection of human life. And so when we think about the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars that get spent in this space, a lot of times on engineering projects that help in those other categories, more can be done with a higher return on investment when it comes to protecting human life. And I think this project speaks to that specifically. So that $10 million for Bexar County seems like really high ROI for protecting human life when it comes to flooding. I do want to just mention a few other things from your analysis here in your presentation. You know, I think it's important that these tools, and again, I don't want to say that this is the be-all, the end-all solution, but I think it's a huge step forward in the direction we need to go, where we have real-time and predictive analysis around floodwaters before they get there, right? And so we can warn our constituents, our citizens, and make sure we protect them from a situation that could cause, you know, life-threatening situation. So obviously you talked about the HALT system, how that could be tied in with the modeling and better information. And this goes to kind of the comms argument. As much as I agree with everything you have on the comm sheet, I'd like to see it go further and talk about, and maybe this isn't just the Bexar County thing, maybe this is a state effort, right? Where we think today about like Amber Alerts, and you know, your phone's like, you know, and you can't ignore it. I saw you mention Waze and Google Maps, right? And obviously that feeds in and can say, oh, roadway's flooded. But beyond that, I think there's a more aggressive alert system that we could try to incorporate, geo-fenced to cell phones that are traveling down a roadway that has predictive analysis that roadway is going to be covered in less than 5 minutes, and warning those individuals, you know, that they are risking their lives if they continue down the current road, right? I would love to see us continue to move down that path and try to have a system so robust and so, you know, tech savvy. Just a couple other comments, and I'll go ahead and pass. But in here, I do think it's very important that with all the growth and development and increased impervious cover, that this model obviously has to continue to be updated, right? Because as we have hundreds of acres continue to turn into concrete, rooftops, streets, we need to continue to update those models, because that flooding risk will change with each and every one of those new roadways. So we need to think about that, and also what are those recurring costs when it comes to going forward and maintaining that model at that high threshold. So I would encourage us to include that as we go forward. I think we really need to have that outreach with the city of San Antonio, and hopefully they buy into this as well. And this is a partnership where they're aligned on it, and we can go forward together, partner and invest in this space. I don't know exactly where all those conversations stand today, or if any of those have taken place with council, but I would encourage us to have those. And then I was going to ask you specifically, around the surrounding counties, have we had any of those discussions, or is that all down the road?
You want to talk, Kendall?
Yes, absolutely. We've already started talking with Wilson, Carnes, and Goliad. Those are in the River Authority's jurisdiction, and we've already got 95 locations identified for potential low water crossing gauges, and we've got 3 already teed up, ready to go out the door. So we're trying to get ILAs in place so we can get those installed sometime over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. So that's kind of the first thing. Those kind of conversations were already happening. As a matter of fact, they started happening April, May, before the storms ever hit. So this is something that's been on our focus, our radar for quite some time. So we're trying to branch out into those other counties, just because we know we're in a kind of a catbird seat, if you will, of being a regional provider. So we've got a really good position on knowing where all of the gauges are and what they're capable of, and extending those capabilities to the regions that don't have the expertise or resources to develop them. So we're already going down that path. And as far as your comment about updating the model, that is something that we do pretty regularly. We're going through a model update right now because of not only impervious cover as a result of development, but rain data is updated every couple of years as part of what's called the Atlas program. And right now we're in Atlas 14, 15 is coming up soon. But whenever the Atlas 14 came out, we began to update all of our flood models. So that's been an ongoing process, and we've done that for 3 of the watershed, 3 of the creeks and streams. We've got 3 more to go, so it's all in progress.
And when it comes to the northern counties, or generally northern of Bexar County, those are outside of our legal jurisdiction, but we certainly have discussions with them, and there's been dialogue with Kendall County about our floodplain mapping. We are one of the only 2 providers in the state that FEMA trusts to handle floodplain mapping on their behalf. It's us and Harris County Flood Control in Houston. But we have a certain boundary on that right now. And Kendall, for example, is interested and has been talking to us about expanding our work into their area via an ILA that FEMA or they would pay for, not with funds within our current jurisdiction. So that dialogue is happening. We talk to, our sister entities frequently, but there's obviously a lot more that needs to happen too.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Yes.
One of the challenges of this proposal is legally, I can't use county money outside of Bexar County.
Right.
So for these other counties, I think that's another partnering opportunity between us, the city, and the River Authority, while the legislature's in session, to advocate for the state to provide funding for those counties.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate you bringing that up because I think, we need to engage those counties. We need to engage with ACOG and other water boards, to not only understand maybe other ideas that they have or other best practices that we could try to integrate, but how do we advocate together, at the state legislature or going forward, how are we going to fund some of these projects that have a benefit across county lines, obviously. So I think the more communication we can have on that front, the sooner the better. I'm happy to help be an advocate in Austin. I think that, again, this seems like a really high return on investment project. I would go as far as to say that before we spend another $10 million on a low water crossing, let's spend the $10 million on making sure that we have this early warning system in place.
Thanks, sir.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Thank you, Judge. I'm going to be brief. It's been a long day, but this is important. Derek, thank you for being here and your patience, because I think we were supposed to get to this a little while back. But, let me ask David, because I know, first of all, let me acknowledge David kind of coming up with the brainstorming with the judge on this really important initiative. And, regardless of the money, it's worth it because of the what's at stake in saving lives. But speaking of the money, do we have funding identified yet? Is it going to be phased? Are we talking about, I saw roughly a $50 million price tag for the entire package. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking with the funding source.
So it won't be 50 million from the county because 32 of it's for outside of Bexar County.
Right.
It could be 20 million for the county, but to be honest with you, I'm hoping the city wants to partner with us and pay for their 11 million. So what the actual recommended motion is to direct me to address funding in the upcoming budget.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes
But
sense.
one way or another, I want Derek to walk out of this meeting and get to work.
Yeah.
So you're going to have your money, one way or another.
And when you say county, I'm assuming obviously you're talking about the unincorporated areas, but the suburban cities are going to need help too.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I think of Leon Valley, which historically has pretty bad flooding in my precinct. So again, I don't want to belabor the point. Important initiative. It is a core function of what county government should be doing in terms of flood control and protecting lives. So I appreciate very much your work on this. Look forward to getting an update down the road. And If there's not been a motion made yet, I'll make a motion that we direct staff to move forward with this.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Rodriguez, second by Commissioner Clay Flores. Commissioner Clay Flores.
Yeah, I just want to thank David Smith for your innovation in putting this together and reaching out to them to put it together. And instead of next generation flood warning system, I think it should be called the David Smith flood warning system. We need a good laugh. It's been a long day. But this is vitally, I am serious. That's what I'm going to call it. Me and my constituents in our precinct. It is the David Smith flood warning system. So this is really, really important, and I appreciate that despite, we're in budget season, everyone's not going to get what they want, but this is really important to put the funding here, so I'm happy to second. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. Any further comment, question? Let me again thank Derek and your team, Jim Campbell and the board. We've had a great, excellent relationship since I've become county judge, and you've kind of brought me up to speed in all the flooding, drainage issues that and the projects that you'll have worked with in regards with the county, especially Judge Wolf, Commissioner Elizondo with that San Pedro Creek, which obviously is a tremendous success. So again, let me echo my thanks to David Smith and his leadership and his team for bringing this matter. I think what I'd like to just conclude today's comment is just, let's not forget, what was it, June 12th? The Beitel Creek flooding and 13 victims?
Yes, sir.
That could have been avoided had we, hopefully it had a warning system. I believe Sarah, San Antonio River Authority, you stepped up to do an immediate independent assessment, which has helped the city and county figure out what needs to be done. What has transpired after that, obviously, was the July 4th flooding up in Kerr County in the Hill Country, which had much more devastation and victims, and the review has been quite brutal. I will tell you that that review has reminded me what my primary job as county judge is, and that's to protect this county. There's a lot of other things I have to do to show up and do things or preside over meetings, but I better damn well make sure that if there's any weather events or catastrophic events or anything in this county, I better be up and at them, and being asleep or being out of town is not going to probably give me much excuse. The public will have a demand on me as to why I didn't react in the way I did. So what is truly empowering about the idea that David has brought out and Derek, y'all have embraced, is the fact that this seems to be, and I'm wanting to really see how this thing's going to work, but this really gets to be more preventive in addition. It's really pre-proactive, so to speak, that if we can get these models and these gauges down, and obviously we have an existing system in effect now, so there's we got to go fix things that have not been fixed. Perhaps in a while we need to upgrade, get the latest software, we got to get the right vendors in. And I know that San Antonio River Authority, with your expertise, we're going to have the state-of-the-art, we're going to have the right system, the right software, the right vendor to make sure that we have a structure that will last many years and not just go out of date, so to speak. The other part that we didn't touch upon, but has been discussed in meetings, especially with me, is that we hope to have a future discussion of a regional. And what we hope is this is one piece towards a regional perspective of how we can incorporate our surrounding counties, especially our rural county, that are obviously definitely impacted by whatever watershed issues we have, or whatever remediation we do will affect other communities, and we need to partner up. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. And Sarah, that's well within your purview and jurisdiction of having adjoining counties to be joining that. So I want to encourage you and your board to include our regional partners, especially our county judges out there, to say, hey, we want to also be part of the solution. And then looking towards whatever the federal funding, state funding that can help supplement. I believe, David, you have basically, so that the public understands, We'd had a big discussion earlier about some big projects that we have now made a decision, but I want to remind the public, and I want to remind the people here and the court that we're still taking care of business. And this is really something that I hope that we can partner with the city of San Antonio, Commissioner Moody, and that obviously, but this is a reminder that city residents, city taxpayers are also county residents and county taxpayers. And I think sometimes city, county kind of we sometimes get caught up in saying, we're not responsible for city of San Antonio because that's the city of San Antonio. We are stepping up to make sure that all residents of Bexar County, including the city of San Antonio, including the suburban cities, including the unincorporated areas, are all part of this next gen warning system. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you very much. I call for a vote. Commissioner Moody.
Just parliamentary inquiry. What is the vote, the motion before us?
So the motion was to direct staff to identify funding this budget cycle for implementation.
Okay, I guess, and my question was just around the specificity of this deal versus, obviously we want to support this sort of movement, but I think there were conversations about like opportunities to add on to it and explore further. So I assume that's kind of included here for staff to look at details and potential opportunities.
Outside of what was presented, you mean? I don't know if that's, I was just thinking what was presented, the motion was to direct staff to look for funding sources for those ideas. I don't know what you're talking about outside of that.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So, and maybe you can just address it. Obviously, this was turned around very quickly, right? And to me, I saw this as a first draft in terms of what we think makes sense and what we'd like to do. I'm not trying to undermine it in any way, but I'm not sure, you know, whether we're 100% confident that this is the plan we want to make sure is in the budget versus this is the direction we want to go, but there may be other things we want to tweak and continue to play with as we go forward here into the budget season. That's just what I was trying to get at.
I mean, I called it a roadmap on purpose. Yes, there are a lot of details that need to be worked through that I think are at this, you know, many of those are at the staff level, and we work with David and his team on that. But yeah, I mean, we are continuing to refine this as we go along. You know, prior to the floods of June and July, we had a update to our regional watershed master plan in the works. We are reviewing the draft right now. We anticipate, you know, by the end of August roughly, that we will be able to come back to both the county and the city and say, if you are considering future bond projects for large infrastructure programs, here is our recommendation on how you prioritize limited dollars. That's just one example, but, you know, the team has been meeting, not daily, but pretty darn close, to flesh this out, you know, develop the schedule. It's a, you know, there is a flow chart of do this before this, and the accompanying schedule. So all of that is underway. I don't know everything yet because we are still looking, you know, what do we want to benchmark ourselves against? Because we want to be, you know, best in class, best in the country. So that is all being figured out, but we feel pretty confident that this is the right start. And after that, or in addition to that, you know, as discussions between the court and David go, but, you know, there's some things in here we regard as critical to keep the system, to get it to the next level. And then there are other things that we would love to talk about doing more, whether it's trash, as Commissioner Calvert talked about, or other things. But this is a bigger discussion, but this gets the ball moving, in our opinion.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Moody?
I believe so. Just that this is a roadmap. It's laid out, but this is directing staff to continue to find funds for this starting point and further refine the roadmap going forward.
So just to be clear, what I'm going to recommend to Commissioners Court is at a minimum, we are going to fund the cost for the suburban cities in the unincorporated area. But what I am telling Derek is whether another partner steps in to fund the 11 million for the city or not, I'll find the 11 million because they're county residents too. So I'm taking the mission initially 10, but if it needs to be the full 21, I'll do it.
I'm sorry, how long have we spent on this item? Does anyone know about an hour? We just spent an hour talking about how important this is, how no one will disagree with me, it's important to save lives. And now we're gonna talk about, I mean, we need to pass it, right? We're not gonna wait for the state, we need to pass it. Hopefully the city will come on board, hopefully we can get reimbursed from the state, but I thought we just spent an hour talking about how important it is, and we're gonna do it.
With that, we'll call the vote.
Well,
Like, I just
Judge,
don't
if I
know why
could
we
really
was
quick.
trying
Oh, we got more discussion then. Commissioner Moody, go ahead.
Well, I just not sure where the comments are coming from. We're obviously supportive here. We're trying to just make sure that we take the right steps forward so we can protect our citizens in Bexar County. I think that's clear.
Okay. Anybody else? Calling for the vote. All those in favor of the motion by Commissioner Rodriguez, second by Commissioner Clayforce? I've lost. Or second by, who was it? Commissioner Moody? Elizabeth, who was it? I just
Who
want to make sure.
seconded? I did.
Okay, just get everybody the motion. All right. It's getting late in the day, guys. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Just want a reminder, Sarah and County, we have called for a press conference at the conclusion. Don't know what time that will be. We're getting there. We are coming around the curve, so to speak. So I want to invite commissioners to please, if you want to participate, we'll have that press conference back in our conference room, all right? So with that, let us move on.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Commissioners.
46, we're going back to consent for those matters that were pulled. Our first consideration is agenda item 37, adoption of the Texas Indigent Defense Commission's Improvement Plan Grant Program Resolution for Year 3, FY 25-26 for the Public Defender Padilla Plus Division, formerly known as the Non-Citizen Unit. Year 3 funding was awarded $232,328 in grant funding, $232,328 in county match funds, for a total project cost of $464,565 for a term beginning October 1, 2025 to September 30th, 2026. Hello, Ms. Malin.
Good afternoon, Judge, Commissioners.
Well, let me just start. Commissioner Moody, you pulled, is there questions or comments? And then let's just hopefully address it.
Fairly
Thank you.
brief comments, and this is one of the grants that starts out with the state and then transitions to county ownership, correct?
Correct.
So I'm just going to be brief because we've talked about this before, and I know on the public defender side, there's a little more ambiguity around services, but the Padilla Plus name to me stands out because fully support the constitutional protections of everyone in our criminal justice system, period, right? Which includes Padilla and the protections that come with that.
Correct.
But I don't support anything beyond that. That's a political decision that this court has made in the past. But I'll highlight that neither do the vast majority of taxpayers in this country. And I'm just going to highlight a couple stats. I wrote an op-ed in the Express News several months ago, but a recent survey conducted by AP Center for Public Affairs Research found that 83% of Americans believe that the U.S. should prioritize deporting illegal immigrants who've committed violent crimes. A separate poll by the New York Times found that nearly 87% of Americans held those same opinions. In the Texas legislative session, House Bill 1554 passed the State Affairs Committee, a vote to ban the practice that we're discussing here today when it comes to using taxpayer dollars for legal services that are not constitutionally protected for non-citizens. I fully believe that ultimately the state will pass a ban, but until then, it seems like our county will continue to fund a policy that the vast majority of taxpayers do not agree with, which I believe that this Video Plus grant and the program that it creates falls into that category, which is why I won't support it, as I haven't previously supported it, but I'll just rest there.
I don't think you need to, can I speak?
Yes.
Are you done? Okay. Do you want to add anything?
I don't need to add much. I would just try to reassure you again that right now we're public defenders. We do what's
Yeah.
mandated by the Constitution. And if we weren't doing it, as the law stands right now, someone would have to do it, which is represent non-citizens. And right now, at least, we're fortunate enough to have the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, at least in part, pay for some of that right now. I understand the grant will run out, and then we'll have to make a decision if we're going to maintain the unit. But right now, it's mandated by the Constitution, and that's all we're doing, Commissioner.
And Judge, I would just,
Mr. Rodriguez.
I'm certain there's probably an economic argument that would maybe appeal to you, Commissioner Moody, but to me, this is about helping vulnerable citizens, whether they're here temporarily or basically it's the humane thing to do to help people who are probably at their most vulnerable. So I'm going to make a motion to approve, Judge.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Rodriguez, second by Commissioner Clay. Any further discussion? Commissioner Moody.
Quick rebuttal. Obviously, there's the economic argument, but no, and specifically the reference was to citizens. This unit was previously called the non-citizen unit. So it is not specifically for citizens. And to your point, Ms. Melton, yes, as I started my comments, I fully support the constitutional requirements that we have when it comes to criminal defense. But as the new name suggests, Padilla Plus, what is included in the plus? Because I don't support funding for additional services. And as I said, political decision, not a decision based on constitutional requirements, in my opinion, and I'll leave it there.
All right, Ms. Malin, there was no question, all right? I'm calling for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Malin. All right, we're taking up the other agenda item, Pool 46. Commissioner Clay Flores, I'm teeing you up. Ratification of grant application, acceptance award from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the solicitation entitled Community Project Funding FY24 in the amount of $750,000 with no match requirement and acceptance of funding upon award to provide for the Americans with Disability Act's ADA modification renovations to the South Sands Civic Center at 503 Lovett Street, San Antonio, Texas 78211. Let me pass to Commissioner Clay Flores.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, I passed this hours ago, and because of all the political gaming, we're still here. People keep telling me I look good, thank you, but I am recovering from colon cancer and I am exhausted. So I have stayed so that I can, since I pulled this, had I known it was going to go this long, I would not have pulled it. So I pulled it, and then I have to leave because I'm exhausted and I'm recovering from colon cancer. So I only pulled it to make a motion for approval to thank Congressman Castro for working with me to get this funding for this county civic center on the south side to improve especially ramps, because we have our seniors and sometimes they have fallen because they are in wheelchairs and they are in walkers. So thank you so much, Ken, for your work on this. Please keep me abreast of when it's starting and how it's going, because we need to do this not just for South San Civic Center, but the rest of our civic centers.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a motion by Commissioner Clay Flores. Second by Commissioner Rodriguez. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. All right, Larry, we have now completed consent, correct? Kate? All right, let us now go to individual items. First up is 83. Presentation, discussion, appropriate action regarding authorization to negotiate an agreement between Bexar County University Health System to provide behavioral health services and the Justice Intake and Assessment Annex, GIA. Contracted services will include staffing costs related to LMSW positions, 1 LMSW supervisor, 4 discharge expediters, and costs related to administration functions including the EPIC electronic medical record system. Dr. Guerrero.
Good afternoon, court members. I am Dr. Andrea Guerrero, Director of Public Health for Bexar County. You've just introduced my item. A little bit about the history of the GIA. The GIA is the Justice Intake and Assessment Annex. So just for context, I know all of you have been at the Bexar County Jail. The GIA is the portion of the jail that begins at the Sally Port and ends when a person is following magistration and is bonded out. The GIA or gets sent upstairs into the main jail. The GIA opened in December of 2018, and it was really in response to ensuring that we, Bexar County, are adhering to Article 1622 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, which addresses how folks are assessed for mental health issues when they are arrested. That Article 1622 was amended following the Sandra Bland Act that was enacted in 2017, and so the GIA was largely in response to that. In the GIA, there are mental health clinicians that provide coverage 24/7 every day of the year, and the goal, really, the bottom line, that the goal of having mental health assessments and having these clinicians in the GIA is to divert qualified persons to mental health and substance use treatment. When we say qualified persons, these are people that have been arrested who are accused of low-level charges, who are eligible for PR bonds, really the same population that we have with the PICU unit. The current process, and really we're talking about, so the GIA, as I said, covers a long process of someone that is brought into custody. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're really talking about just the process for assessing someone for mental health issues and substance use issues when they come into the jail. So the first encounter with these mental health screening questions usually happens with law enforcement from whatever jurisdiction that person is arrested, where they ask for mental health screening questions. Then when they're taken into custody at the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, they also ask these questions and could be flagged at that time for CCQ, which just means continuity of care, meaning that we need to take a closer look at this person to see if they need services or a mental health assessment. While they're going through the booking process, the Center for Healthcare Services is the current provider of these mental health assessments, and they are the ones that provide the clinicians that do the mental health assessments currently. ACOG is also present in the GIA, and they perform IDD screenings and attempt diversion for those individuals, which is a different population from mental health and substance use. And then finally, University Health System is present in the GIA as well, and they provide medical and physical assessments for folks who are arrested. They are present there in the booking area. It should be noted also that University Health is a behavioral health provider for folks who are booked into the main jail and who aren't released from the GIA. So back in October 2023, this court approved a study to be conducted by Dr. Alexander Testa, who is a professor and researcher at UT Health Science Center, Houston. And the purpose of that evaluation was to provide an assessment of the efficiency of the GIA process and to make recommendations. So from April 2024 through June 2024, Dr. Testa and his team were physically present in the GIA. They watched the process, and they watched the entire process from booking through magistration through release. And so, as I said, this presentation is to just focus on the mental health assessment, particularly Chapter 4 of his report, which was presented to the board in February of 2025. So earlier this year, Dr. Testa came and presented his findings and his recommendations. So we look at some of the data related to mental health and substance use diversions going back to 2019. So this would be like a year after the GIA opened and mental health assessments and substance use assessments were being done. You'll see that the total annual diversion, so the total number of times a person was successfully diverted into treatment was 2019 was 565, and with each subsequent year, 394, 4043, 526, and you'll see a decline over the last 2 years. So if we look, just take a deeper dive just into the data from last year, so this would be FY 2024, the total number of assessments that were completed in the GIA were nearly 19,000. 3,200 or almost 3,300 were suicide assessments, and then nearly 16,000 were full assessments. Of that number, 481 diversions were requested. Now, the total number of diversions that were actually completed, approved, because there are any number of reasons why a diversion wouldn't be approved. The magistrate doesn't approve it, they don't qualify. So the total number of diversions was 278. Of those, 116 were emergency detentions. CHCS, the provider in the GIA, diverted 105 to their services, and then continuing services, which are outpatient, are 42. For substance use diversions, CHCS completed 15 substance use diversions during that year. So if we look at Dr. Testa's report, and often one of the criticisms of research or of an evaluation of reports or assessments that are conducted like this, the criticism is that it's just another report that will sit on the wall, sit on the shelf, and that we won't really, take heed of some of the things, the findings and the recommendations in that report. So we have a real opportunity here to really heed Dr. Testa's findings and to understand why it is that these diversions are not what we would expect them to be. His finding was that the system as it exists now is what he described as fragmented, that there are a lot of players, a system that doesn't necessarily run in a linear fashion, where it's not just, okay, now you're ready for the next step, now you're ready for the next step. Sometimes you're interacting with all of those entities, including sheriff's office, including pretrial, not always in the same order. And that this process can lead to errors in communication amongst those different entities. It could delay treatment for folks who really need mental health services immediately or in a timely fashion. And it can create some inconsistencies with how these folks are treated. And it can also contribute to a decrease in appropriate care for people who are arrested, which in addition places a burden on BCO staff, can cause delays in classification, and other issues that it can create in the jail environment. So the recommendation that we are making, based on Dr. Testa's input, his report, and in consultation with his team, is to integrate this process for conducting mental health and substance use assessments under one provider. So the provider that is currently there that is doing the physical and medical assessments is the University Health System, and they have the capacity and the functionality to conduct mental health and substance use assessments, and then to refer, discharge to appropriate care in the outpatient setting. Additionally, the introduction of a substance use screener in the intake process that would also be administered by civilian staff at UHS. The current implementation for IDD assessment that is conducted by ACOG is operating appropriately. It's meeting expectations. It's a slightly different population than the mental health and substance use population, so we are not recommending a change in that provider. What will this accomplish? Our priority is to the folks who have been